Coming up on Brevard Watch, why Melbourne Beach has to fight to preserve its small-town character. Investors tell Florida cities to prepare for climate change and sea level rise or face credit downgrades. And what can Brevard schools and cities do to encourage more young professionals to settle in Brevard County? This is Brevard Watch, the news experience focused exclusively on Florida's Space Coast. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring Brevard Watch. My interview guest today is Wyatt Hoover. He's a Melbourne Beach Town Commissioner who has strong thoughts on how conservatism and the environment can go together. He's the manager of River Oak Dental in Melbourne, a practice that is gaining a reputation for civic activism and support of our local schools. He was founding chairman of the Engage Young Professionals organization in South Brevard. He has degrees from Florida State and Florida Tech, and he's a finalist for Lead Brevard's annual 4 Under 40 Awards. Wyatt, thanks for joining us on Brevard Watch today. I don't think Melbourne Beach gets a lot of news coverage, so let's go ahead and take advantage of that moment now and break news. What's going on in Melbourne Beach?
You know, I think we don't like to be in the news that often. We're a quiet little town. We're a residential community, and we like it that way. But I'll give you an update of kind of some stuff that we have going on. We just hired a new town manager, Bob Daniels. Joins us from South Florida. He has some experience in beachside communities, and he's been with us for a little over a week. Really excited to have him. He's doing a great job so far. Welcome, Bob, if you're watching. And last night we actually had a town commission workshop on sustainability, and so we had Dr. Ken Lindeman from FIT come and speak to us about some of the projects that him and his department over there have helped to spearhead with Satellite Beach and their sustainability board, and hopefully we can, ride the coattails, so to speak, on some of the research and heavy lifting on things that need to be done in that area. So we're excited to be kind of looking to the future and making sure that Melbourne Beach stays the small residential community that it is and that people love it for, but also that we're doing what we need to do to be good stewards of the community and really make sure that we're being good waterfront residents. As we know, I think it's pretty well known in the community that the lagoon is having some challenges, and so we want to make sure that we're minimizing our impact there. That's about it, really.
One of the sea turtle nesting capitals of the world.
Right.
So you got to take care of those interests as well.
The beaches, right? The beaches are important to us, and that's one of the reasons we have our zoning and ordinances and height restrictions and things like that to keep the beaches nice and safe and quiet, not just for the sea turtles, but for our residents. One of my favorite things is walking over to the beach, and you go over there and look right and look left, and you see a total of 5 people within view, and makes for a really nice, relaxing day with your friends or family.
And I believe you have a statue of Ponce de Leon in the beachfront park there, courtesy of the Tourist Development Council at some point.
I think that may be a little south of our borders.
Okay.
The Ponce de Leon landing is technically an unincorporated, but we'll take credit for that. If you
Pardon me, I'm sorry. Well, at least you've got some history there. Earlier on in this first season of Brevard Watch, we interviewed Mayor Jim Simmons of Melbourne Beach. Look at that, 2 people from Melbourne Beach in the same season, and he was.
I love our mayor. He does a great job.
He's a cool guy. He was frustrated though about home rule issues, vacation rentals. Trying to limit those people who put out their homes on, I guess, vacation rental by owner or Airbnb. Chumming the waters for shark fishing was one that was frustrating to him. And I know that other cities are kind of wringing their hands over what to do about allowing medical marijuana facilities or not. What's your take on these home rule issues? Are they really as frustrating as he made them out to be?
The short answer is yes. I think it's bigger than just individual topics, though. And being elected just a little over a year ago in 2016, I'm new to public office, and so I spent a lot of time getting to know the issues in Melbourne Beach and what our residents want from me. And so I'm certainly not an expert on the broader field of medical marijuana, or vacation rentals, certainly not shark chumming. But to kind of break them down briefly from my perspective, the vacation rental issue is tough. We want to allow our residents to earn some additional income if they can, but there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. When I was running for office, I told my residents and the voters that, we need to be good neighbors to each other. And when I say that, I mean both the business community and the residents need to be good neighbors to each other. And we try to do that in Melbourne Beach and support our businesses. We have some awesome restaurants and small businesses on our little main street on Ocean Avenue. And we love to frequent those guys and support them. And they do the same to us. And they support, Gemini Elementary and the Rotary Club and all the events, Pineapple Man triathlon that we have every year, and our Founders Day celebration. They do a great job of that. And, I think our residents who are renting their homes and using that as a business need to take that same perspective. And so we have some residents that have really strict rental policies, and they don't allow huge groups of people coming into the neighborhood and having parties and crazy stuff. And we have some people who are doing some things like that. And I think it's really important that as a community, we're allowed to set the standard of what our residents can expect from their neighbors and from the business community. And that's really what I think home rule boils down to is, does the state and the officials up there trust us to know, or do they believe that we as local elected officials know our community and know our residents better than they do? And I think the obvious answer is, of course we do. We're more responsive. We're not beholden to campaign promises to donors or anything like that. I raised $2,500 for my campaign. It was really simple. Met with some people. They liked what I had to say, and I got elected. All those donations came from individuals in the community, and so I'm beholden to those people who are my neighbors. And so when they have a problem, if they don't like something, they can walk over to my house or call me and talk about it. Shark chumming is Jim's issue. That's not really a problem.
It is a little scary. Now, if I'm going to swim in the beach, I would prefer.
Right.
It's already a little bit nerve-wracking, but you get it that there are going to be people fishing on the beach. But the idea that they're going to decide that right there near where your family is going to the beach, they're going to throw blood and guts into the water to attract sharks, it's a little unnerving.
It is. I agree with you 100%. It's not something that's like a chronic problem in Melbourne Beach. There's isolated instances of people doing that here, and they can do that in any part of the coast that they would like. But I think it really highlights the sort of nonsense of that perspective of running things from the state level. It just doesn't make any sense with whatever my position is nonpartisan, but I'm a Republican, and one of the core Republican ideals is small government. And I don't know how they can sit there from Tallahassee and say that we're going to understand what's going to be best for you guys. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I don't think it makes sense to the voters or to anyone outside of Tallahassee. And I think they should appreciate that, because they turn around and say the exact same thing to their colleagues in Washington, D.C. So I don't know how it doesn't, what's the difference? I haven't heard anybody explain that to me. So I'd be interested to hear about that. And then the medical marijuana issue is, I think it's a bit overblown. I think it's a really dynamic and changing industry. Again, I'm not an expert in that to any degree, but from what I've read, they kind of have their own little niche set up, and it may be expanding into pharmacies, and it may be a non-issue at some point. But I think a lot of the fears are unfounded. I get the impression that people kind of feel like there's going to, if you allow,
it's going to be Starbucks for stoners, and people are going to be smoking all over town.
Right. I say that people are afraid that like a Grateful Dead concert is going to break out in the street, and the reality is that there's people in a lot of pain that really rely on this, and it's a great alternative to opioids. If you do some research and do the reading, do your due diligence, you'll understand that this is not some recreational spring break type of situation where it's going to turn every place into a party town or whatever they think is going to happen. People just want to not be in pain, when they're in chemotherapy and not be in pain when they have chronic back issues and things like that. And it's a little sad to me that people are kind of stigmatizing the issue in that way.
We've just got about a minute left in this segment, and I know you're just in your first year in public office here, but public education, you've got one school in the city limits of Melbourne Beach, Gemini Elementary. Yeah, it's a 5-star school, meaning lots of public engagement and volunteerism. School of excellence, meaning it's performed well academically. That's nice, but how important, or how would you size up the city's relationship with its schools? How do they fit together?
You know, our Gemini's relationship with our entire community is outstanding. So I don't know if I would say that it's direct with the city, but our entire community has embraced that school and its kids and the programs. And I'm a Rotarian in Melbourne Beach as well, and we're always doing fundraisers to support them, and the town supports that. And so I would say it's a great relationship. I know we have Principal Julian is new, and the administration up here in Viera was receptive and responsive to the parents' desire to keep her. She was the assistant principal first, and they promoted her to principal, and everybody was ecstatic about that. Well, we loved the previous principal, Principal Lafayette. Fantastic. We were sorry to see him go, but that continuity was really important to the parents, and I think to the students as well, and probably the faculty, who I don't know as well. But yeah, you know, the relationship is great. We don't have to communicate with the school board up here in Viera too frequently. As you said, it's an outstanding school, so there's no problems. But we love the kids, love the teachers and the faculty to death, and it's a great part of the community.
When we come back, bond investors want to know what cities are doing in Florida to prepare for climate change.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
This is Brevard Watch. I'm Matt Reed. Wyatt, let's talk about some headlines now, and there are things that could definitely impact Melbourne Beach. Headline number one is that Moody's, I guess it's Moody's Investors Service, they do the bond rating for bond investors, says they're going to start watching how Florida cities cope with sea level rise, flooding, in order to see how well they're able to, I guess, pay their bills.
Right.
If you are coping with if your property values are going down and your tax revenue goes down because of hurricanes or flooding, at the same time you have to spend a lot of money on, I don't know, pumps, pipes, seawalls, investors ought to know about it. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, Melbourne Beach is a really small town, and I'm not sure how, investors and how important we are to investors in that type of situation, but we certainly have some challenges with respect to stormwater and maybe not so much sea level rise in the immediate future, but that's something that we're addressing. I think I mentioned to you before we got started here that we just had Dr. Ken Lindeman from FIT come and speak to us about sustainability and the things that they've been able to get started and are accomplishing in Satellite Beach, and we'd really love to work with them and learn what they've been successful at and how we can move forward on that aspect, and hopefully collaborate with the rest of the riverfront communities that we have here in Brevard and throughout the Indian River Lagoon to move forward on those issues. They're really important. It's a tough issue because it's not something that really is continually in your face unless you're have 2 hurricanes in one budget cycle, which we did. It was really great timing. It was right at the beginning of 2017, and then Irma came right at the end, and so that was tough for us. But we're looking at some ways to budget those infrastructure upgrades so that we'll be hardened against the effects of climate change and be more resilient and allow our residents to get back to their lives as quickly as possible following those things. As a business owner, it's really important to me. And so I can't speak for investors so much, but my wife and I own a small business here in the community, and it was really tough for us. We didn't have any damage to our home or our business, but the weeks following that, we were meeting with insurance adjusters, and so were all of our patients, and it really caused a lot of chaos. So the extent to which our communities can harden our infrastructure and make sure that we're going to be resilient regardless of what comes our way and regardless of the frequency with which hurricanes and severe storm events come our way, we're going to be able to handle that and move on with our lives, and when they're not here, enjoy our wonderful little towns on the beach.
Yeah, I think a number of economists and Wall Street watchers were saying that probably most cities are not going to do a whole lot about this until somebody gets downgraded, and the next time they go out to sell bonds to build a road or refinance something, it's going to cost them a lot more, and they're going to start taking that a little bit more seriously. But that brings us to our next headline. I just want to get your take on things. You mentioned that you were using an expert at Florida Tech to help out. One of the headlines this week was that it was about Satellite Beach. Public Radio International featured Satellite Beach, saying that the city's plans for coping with those issues include restoring dunes, buying up some threatened properties, turning those into parks, raising roads, putting in bigger pipes to drain away floodwaters, and relocating some critical infrastructure like the fire station to a place that's higher and drier. What do you make of those things?
Great ideas. I know that Dr. Lindeman explained the process through which they evaluated and made those priorities, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm not a PhD in sustainability or oceanography or any of the areas that Dr. Lindeman is, but he explains it in a way that's easily understandable to myself and to other elected officials. And those are great ideas. And what we need to do as municipalities, I think, is kind of follow their lead, and not in copycatting necessarily, but going through the process of evaluating our infrastructure, looking at our weak points, starting off with the low-hanging fruit, and picking off those items. And it's a continuous process. It's not something that we're going to say, okay, we're going to make this investment between now and 2020 or 2025, and then we're going to be like, okay, we're good. I think it's something that needs continuous attention from residents as well as elected officials to find those indicators and those weak spots and have a continuous focus on it. We've talked outside of this program about a concept that you like to discuss sometimes, environmental conservatism. Sure. Explain. How can those two things go together in the same sentence? So, I don't know if I made this up or what, but maybe I did. Somebody else has probably said this before. That the concept to me is I'll back up just for a moment if I can and tell you that my background in education at Florida State was my undergrad was in biology. I studied at FIT actually under Dr. Lindeman for a few courses on marine biology and ecology. So my background has been in the sciences, and my professional career has been in business primarily. I'm a small business owner. I partner with my wife to run our business, and the two issues are not distinct necessarily. And so I think people have looked at environmental issues for the most part, and a lot of times the scientific community presents environmental issues and challenges and priorities from a perspective of this is important to the environment, or you should love manatees or save manatees because they're cute. And I don't really think that people need to love or care about manatees. I don't mean to beat up on manatees. I love them. They're great. No, but in the academic world, there's almost a culture of you shouldn't have an economic reason for doing this science. Right. You should be doing science for science sake. Right. So when it comes time to present those findings to the public, they don't always think in terms of what's going to knock these people dead as a sales pitch. And the sad thing, and I think we're getting there as a community, is that there are really the economic benefits are higher a lot of times than the scientific doing it for the science benefits. And the lagoon is a great example. The Marine Resource Council has been doing lagoon report cards for decades, and as a community we kind of waited until we had this huge disaster event, and it was with the fish kills we had in the previous years, it was really sad. There was the world record redfish was caught belly up in a net, dead, up in the northern part of the Banana River, I think. And the impacts from the nursery communities are so wide-reaching, and we're not going to see the full impacts on the fisheries community, on the commercial fisheries and recreational fisheries for probably years to come. But all of those little babies that come in once they're spawned into the lagoon, when those fish kills happen, all those little guys die too. And so it's just one example, but so often it makes a lot more sense. Just like with retirement or maintaining your home, you save for your roof because in 30 years you're going to have to replace your roof. When we're looking at our infrastructure, you can't wait on these issues because just like with roads and every other type of investment that communities or families need to make, you got to chip away at it. And if you wait until it's a problem, like we've done with the lagoon, you end up spending $300 million to just fix what was broken. And I look at what the things that we could have done in our community with that $300 million had we had the foresight 3 decades ago to begin mitigating these issues and to begin reducing the impact that we're having on the lagoon. And so long term, as a community, I hope the young professional community is on board with me, and we're not going to let up on this issue, and we want to be future focused and looking at how we can make sure that as a foundation, the environment is there and healthy, because when things go wrong, it costs us all a lot of money. And then on top of that, you have your social structure. And then at the very top of that pyramid, or however you want to describe it, is our economy. And if either of those foundations aren't strong, we're going to have a shaky economic future. And it's something that I think people are starting to understand, but we still have a long way to go.
So more conservative and less expensive and less intrusive, certainly, to deal with problems and prevent things from the front end, and to wait for them to become a crisis.
Right.
And then you're on the hook for a lot.
We need to view the environment as a resource, just like we view our property that I own as a homeowner. That's a resource, an investment, and at some point I'm going to give that to my kids or whoever, and the rest of the community in the future can enjoy that. And we want to do the same thing with our community. All of Brevard is my backyard. That's why we live here in Florida and on the Indian River Lagoon, because it's beautiful and there's so many amazing things to do that don't cost any money, and they're just there for us. But we got to take care of our resources.
When we come back, what are cities and schools doing to make Brevard County a more attractive place for our young people to settle down as young professionals?
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
This is Brevard Watch. I'm Matt Reed. Wyatt, let's talk about one of your other projects or issues that you work on. It's the Engaged Young Professionals organization. I want to get your take on a question that I've asked before, and that is what role or what can our schools or our cities play in making Brevard County and the Space Coast a more likely place for the best and brightest of our kids to want to come back and settle down and make lives for themselves as young professionals?
Well, it's a tough question to answer. I don't think it's limited to those two groups. I think we need to include the philanthropic community. We need to include our business community and our civic community. Well, you said municipalities. So, but we need to look at making our community a little bit more modern and addressing issues like walkability. Some people may have read a report recently that didn't present Brevard in too favorable of a light with respect to pedestrian safety. And I think as our community is projected to grow from, I think we're at about 560,000 residents in Brevard to by 2030, it's going to be around 1 million. It's a pretty substantial increase. And so as we're moving about our communities and downtown and along the beaches, it's important that people are able to move about safely and enjoy the outdoors in the best parts of Brevard and of our respective towns or neighborhoods. So that's one really important part. It's just making it a little bit more friendly for everyone, young people, families, but also getting. I'm going to use the engaged pun because it's the engaged professionals a lot here, so be prepared for that. It's an important part that that we can do is kind of looking and seeing how we can be a more friendly community for everybody to participate. One of my good friends and the current Engage co-chair, I think former guest of this show, Jaren Eisenberg. She's the executive director of downtown Melbourne Main Street, and she talks about creating memories in building and investing downtown in events like the Food and Wine Festival. They have FIT Homecoming down there, partnering with communities and businesses to create memories, and that's what attaches people here. You have memories and you create relationships, then that leads to building families, and once you have roots, you stay in a place.
Yeah.
And so we want to not be the stepping stone for our engineers and aerospace people, and we want them to make that money and keep it here in the community.
Congratulations, by the way, on your nomination for the
Thank
4
you.
Under 40 award. I was stoked
Very
to see
exciting.
that another one of the nominees was Krista Miller, the astronaut high school principal. I've worked with her before. She's a high energy person. And what I loved about that was seeing that educators being recognized as professionals. And we don't think about that all the time. But I mean, is the Engage Young Professional Group a good place or an appropriate place that we might want to plug in some of our newly hired young teachers that come to Brevard County? I mean, is it
Yes, 100% yes to that question, and I'll even take it a step further, and kind of say, I know that it's not just engaged young professionals that are doing great things in the community. For the young professional community, there's 321 Millennials. Lead Brevard, of course, that you just mentioned, is doing fantastic things for the young professional community. The United Way has their Emerging Leaders program. I think Cocoa Beach has that chamber has a young professional program as well. And and so what we need to do, I think, is get all these organizations out of their silos. Northrop Grumman has a great, I think they call them ERG, employee resource groups, but those are specific to young professionals, all sorts of other demographics, and I'll extend that to FIT, EFSC, Harris, all the groups that are doing these things kind of in their own little silo, and so I want to break down those walls and allow some collaboration. We can't have one group, organizing all of the young professionals in the community, certainly, but I had the opportunity actually to meet with the Connect 1NG. I believe she's the 2017 president for Northrop, Mayanka Gray, and we talked about just doing some collaboration between Engage and between Northrop, and none of that's formalized or anything yet, but I'm really excited about the opportunity to bring those guys into the fold. And same thing with the school system. There's so many young professionals that come here, and they're somewhat isolated within their professional groups, whether that's in a classroom or a school or a department at Northrop or wherever they happen to be. And a big part of creating those memories is bringing people out of those silos where they're kind of on their own, with your colleagues, and that's it. And we want to introduce the teachers to the engineers and to the doctors and attorneys and everybody else that has an important role to play within Brevard, because there's so many people. One of my favorite things about Brevard is that it's such a diverse community. You walk anywhere and you're bound to have a mind-blowing conversation with some kind of aerospace engineer or someone, building a startup or, a math professor at FIT or something like that. And, it never gets old. And so I've always kind of reached out and sought out those people and bring them into my life, because I like to learn from them and make relationships and be friends with them as well. And I want to encourage the rest of the community to do that. It's a little uncomfortable at times, but that's the role of Engage Young Professionals and all the other community building, not just for young professionals, but community building organizations that we have in Brevard. Remove the silos, more engagement, and more participation. And once we get to know each other, I think that's where the bonds are built. And when you know your neighbors, I think our political environment could probably learn a lesson from that concept as well. You got to know people in order to really understand their challenges and to be a part of their life, and especially as an elected official. The more I know about Brevard and Melbourne Beach's neighboring communities, the better steward I can be of our little lovely little town.
Because when we talk about roots, what we really mean is relationships.
You got it.
Well, you mentioned, I thought that was great. The person in front of you at Publix in line wearing flip-flops just might be a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our final headline
Maybe
of the
he's
day.
been in space.
We have just a minute left. Headline: SpaceX CEO Elon Musk. They're going to launch their Falcon Heavy rocket for the first time. It's a pretty risky mission.
Yep.
The heavy load in this one is going to be, it looks like Elon Musk's own Tesla Roadster.
Right.
What do you make of that?
Well, if you asked me to go on the record, with a prediction?
You can react however you want. This is your interview.
I think it's a great idea. Anything that draws attention to the efforts that the United States is making to expand our efforts in space is great. It's great for Brevard, of course, because we're very heavy in those industries. I think it's great for SpaceX. It's a great idea. A little bit of a marketing ploy, but put your money where your mouth is. And so I think Elon may be sandbagging it a little bit, and I think it's going to go off without a hitch. If it does, maybe he'll see this and give me his roadster.
Well, it'll either work or it'll be a very nice Tesla artificial reef somewhere off of Cape Canaveral. So we'll see how that goes.
I'll be diving out there then.
Wyatt Hoover, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks,
today.
man.
Well, that's our program. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring Brevard Watch, including its promotion across the Space Coast. And again, thanks to our guest today, Melbourne Beach Town Commissioner and organizer of Young Professionals, Wyatt Hoover. Our producer, editor, and drone photographer is Mike Francisco. I'm Matt Reed. Watch for us all week on Facebook and YouTube.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.